2016, in a very rigorous campaign for mayor, there were several forums, and we discussed several of these: public safety and replacing the chief. And I made 3 promises. One, I would bring a full-time police auditor. We had a part-time police auditor who lived in Colorado with no staff. So we did bring in a full-time John Gliotta, who's in the back, as our police auditor. And I fulfilled that promise. I said I'd create a Citizens Public Safety Advisory Board. We've done that. The most important one, I said, this was at St. Claret's Church debate, would you, when everybody knew by 2020 we'd replace the chief, would you do a open, citizen-led review for the next chief? And I'm here to give you the 3rd promise. We have probably the most comprehensive, transparent process we've ever done for selecting the chief of police. And the chief of police is going to have a very important position that will affect the lives of everybody in this community. So the process is we have online surveys that will have the same 4 questions you'll have tonight that anybody can submit in English, Spanish, or Hmong. This is the 5th of 5 meetings in each policing district where citizens have a direct input. We're taking notes, we're listening to what you're saying. So between the online surveys and the 5 meetings at the district offices, we're going to compile all the data to our search firm, and then they're going to know what the citizens of Fresno want in terms of police chief. We're doing a national search. We're also taking any existing, there'll be at least 2 or 3 or more existing police officers in senior positions probably applying for this job, but it'll be a national search. My goal is to have select a new chief by September. There'll probably be 2 or 3 interview panels, which will include some citizen participation as well as city officials. So by next September, we'll hopefully have a new chief of police. I have listened along the way and have heard the voices of what people in the city of Fresno want. So your words, your ideas, your suggestions have resonated with me. So I'm honored to be here tonight, and I'll introduce our facilitator, a man who needs no introduction, Larry Powell.
Well, it's so nice to have each of you here tonight. I love what happens when democracy is in action. And tonight you get the opportunity, not only from an online point of view, which you could do on your own, but publicly to talk about the issues that are important to selecting a police chief. And so we're going to take, and we're probably going to do a committee of the whole tonight. If we had had a whole lot more people, then I would have broken you up into groups. But I think you'll be able to do what we need to do by getting an opportunity to come up and speak. We have enough time for that to happen. What I'd like to do before we get started with the public speaking portion of this and sharing your recommendations, take a couple of minutes in case you haven't looked at the questions and begin to write down some of the comments you would like to make so that when you come to the mic, you can be right on topic and move right along so that everybody who wants to speak will get an opportunity to do so. So if you've got the paper in front of you, it looks like this. If you've got some things you'd like to make sure we get to hear, just jot those down so when you come up, you don't go, well, I'm not, so we want to be right on target with what we're wanting to do. Honor your time so that we can get out at an appropriate time when everybody has had a say and an opportunity to do so. So take 2 minutes just to make sure, and some of you have come already prepared, but take 2 minutes to go through and just write down the comments that you would like to make sure we hear on each of the 4 questions. And let me read the questions to you again, just so that you can see what are the challenges in the city that you would like the new police chief to address. So what challenges do we face from your perspective? And you got to remember, with 5 of these taking place across the city, we have different views, and so every point of view is really important to us because we're getting somebody who's the police chief for everybody, not just for one particular area. What issues facing the city should the new police chief be aware of? Some of this information is going to be shared so that candidates know what we're looking for, in a chief. I think it's only fair that we get a chance to hear what their best answers are to things that are coming their way from us. And so this is an opportunity to share the kinds of issues that exist in the city of Fresno. Number 3, what qualities are most important to look for in the next police chief? So the characteristics that you want to make sure that next police chief, male, female, whichever, has, so that we have someone who is subject to the things that the community wants in the way of leadership in our police department. And 4, is there anything else that the city manager should consider when selecting the next police chief? This is a miscellaneous catch-all. So if one of the 3 questions does not satisfy a desire you have to share something, that's what the 4th question is for. So you can put anything you want in there that you would like us to know so that we can take a quick look at what the community is saying, and we'll be ready to go. So everybody had a chance to write something. I stretched that out a little bit so you had a time to write some things down. So we're going to start with question number 1 then. And if you would like to speak, one of the mics here, if you'll come and make sure that you speak into the mic so that it can be recorded, so we make sure we get your input, because it is very valuable to this process. And it only works if we can actually hear what you have to say. All right, who would like to speak first on what are the challenges in the city that you would like the new police chief to address? If you do not have any, that is perfectly fine. If you've already filled out the online form or want to do that instead, that's perfectly fine as well. So it's whatever you would like to do. So anybody have any comments on the challenges city faces that the police chief needs to know about? Yeah, Dottie. Yeah, right here.
Is it okay if I come up again?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dorothy Smith, and I am a retired educator, lifelong Fresno resident. And when you think in terms of what challenges, I think what our new chief, most important to me, is that understand that we live in a city, which I call a tale of 2 cities. And if he is a president, if he is the chief of Fresno, he needs to be the chief of Fresno, and or he or she, and they need to know what's happening in rural Fresno as opposed to from the bluff to the Huff. See, I was raised out in the country, and I think that this, tell me if I'm going too long. He knows me, so you just tell me if I'm going too long.
No, you're good.
But I really think that the new chief needs to take a tour of our city. I have taken that tour. I've gone all the way out past the dumps, the slaughterhouses, all the way up to the bluff. And what the chief needs to understand is that the closer you get to the bluff, the greener it gets, the more parks, those types of things. And many times, it's not so much, we all talk about the crime and whatever, but it's what we have to offer, I believe, as an educator and a parent, that will help prevent crime. So the chief needs to know the community, needs to know the people, and I do not want a chief to say, I'm colorblind, because I want him to see my blackness. I want him to see our Hmong, our Hispanics. I want them to see this. So that's an insult to most of us to say I'm colorblind. See me.
Thank you, Dorothy. Anyone else have something to contribute? Sure, come on up. And if you'll state your name, just make it a little easier. Thank you.
Claire Statham, Fresno resident, District 7. And the last speaker, Ms. Smith, when she spoke about the greener you get, you see I'm wearing a Rails to Trails shirt here. I was a great advocate for Measure P, not just because parks are nice things, but I think that the quality of life, the crime that you experience in a city, those things are all tied to the amenities and the quality of life that you have, the parks, the trails, the after-school programs, the summer programs. All of that is part of law enforcement. And I think especially as a person who taught middle school for nearly 30 years, if you keep those kids engaged, if you have programs, you are preventing a lot of the problems that will happen. And so I think that the new chief needs to see things not just from a law enforcement almost after the fact kind of approach to crime, but a prevention point of view as well. And so I think that taking a good look at what Fresno needs in terms of improving the quality of life for all Fresno is something I hope that he would be in favor of and lend his support to.
It's a great challenge. Thank you. Yes. Anyone else on question number 1? Sure, come on up. Hi.
Way too short for this. But I can project really well. My name is Sandra Celedon, and I work for Fresno Building Healthy Communities. We're a local coalition of community-based organizations. And I'm also a new neighbor in the Hoover area. I've been living here now for the last 2.5 years. So I think one of the things that I would mention for the new police chief to know, I think there's definitely a very clear disconnect between the community at large and our police department. And I think that is a result of generations of over-policing, specifically communities of color. And I think that the next chief really should be aware of this lack of trust there's huge gap between community members and the police department. And part of that, I think, is a result of the fact that there is a lack of transparency and accountability within our police department. And that then shows up in how policing is conducted in our community. So I think that it's also really problematic in that there is a division clearly in our community by race. And I think, to me, that shows most clearly when we have our current police chief speaking in public settings and referring to suspects who are predominantly people of color as animals. I find this to be very problematic in the way that we use language to describe community members in our city. And I think there's also a feeling that our current police chief does not serve everyone in our community. So I think those are some things that our next police chief really should be aware, because there are root issues that are deeply ingrained in our community, that if we're going to move forward and build a community police department that actually serves everyone, it really needs to acknowledge the wounds that are open in our community and acknowledge them in a way that there's a clear commitment to address them moving forward. So I would highlight that.
Thank you, Sandra. Anyone else? Sure, come on up.
Wasn't sure I was going to speak. I've been.
And what's your name?
My name is Brandy Nuss-Viegas.
Thank you, Brandy.
I've been involved in researching and paying attention and things with the homeless. And I know that one of the challenges that the community faces is that general relationship with those who are homeless, and then with the homeless with those who are in law enforcement. So I think that one of the things that we addressed is possibly the idea of being able to bridge that, the idea, because a lot of them have contact with the police department because of the role of the police department, seeking to a more constructive, like thinking of creatively of ways of building communities, in general, for the police department to continue to build relationship with all community members of all marginalized groups, all neighborhoods, considering different people that we haven't been thinking of, those who have communities that might not be as understood, like those who have varying types of mental illness that have had issues in the past when it comes to issues with law enforcement, but including that with almost thinking of it in terms of being community members and constituents and stuff, to think of creative ways to build, working in a way that they're partnering with and trying to come up with solutions and also help bridge the divide in the relationship with those in the rest of the community.
Thank you, Brandy. Yeah, appreciate that. Okay. Anybody else with a comment on number 1? Don't want anybody to feel rushed or... Everybody good? If you think of something after we've gone through and you want to come up and make another comment, let me know. Okay? All right, let's move to number 2. What issues facing the city should the new police chief be aware of and understand? Now, it feels like some similarities between these. But if you have specific issues that you want to make sure that the new police chief is aware of, this is a good time to put those on the table. Sure, come on up.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Hardo. I'm a freshman at Edison High School. And one of the issues I believe that the new police chief has to deal with or take up when he comes in is the SROs, or the school resource officers, and mainly the powers and the things that they can do and what they can't do. Because some of the kids and some people in general, including myself and my brother, we don't really feel safe, or we don't really trust the SROs when they're really around. We get the point of them, but we don't really we don't understand the powers, and we're kind of scared of what they can and what they can't do. One time, me and my brother, we get scared when the drug dogs when they come into our classrooms and they search the classrooms. It's always happened to me or my brother. Recently, my brother just got not caught, but the dogs kind of sniffed his backpack, and he's never done any drugs. He's never done anything like that. But they took him out. They questioned him, and they looked through his backpack. He didn't have anything but an inhaler and a stick of deodorant. And the inhaler was only because me and him, we both have really bad asthma, and so if we don't have it on us, an asthma attack could just break down at any second, and we need to have it on us. And from that day on, he didn't really trust the SROs or the dogs or in general. But for me, whenever the dogs would come in or an SRO would come into my class, I've never really felt safe, especially when the dogs. I've always felt scared when the dogs would come in they'd come in with the dogs and have them search the room. I've always got scared, are they gonna catch my inhaler? All I have is an inhaler. I don't want to get booked or anything just for have an inhaler or get detention for anything like that. But that's what I really think is one of the issues that what the new police chief has to handle with, mainly just what the SB a little bit more transparent with the SROs and what the powers and the restrictions that they really have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. SROs are school resource officers, and we can also help with communication with the superintendent on that. So parents also understand what those are. Okay, anything else? Number 2 on issues. Going? All right, let's move to number 3. What qualities are most important to look for in the next police chief? So we're looking at personal characteristics. What kinds of qualities do you want in the person who becomes the police chief next go around? So good opportunity to share what your thoughts are on this. So who would like to start it off? Welcome. Can you give us your name?
My name is Perina Washington,
Perina, thank you.
and I live locally here. If we get a new police officer, I'd like to see a police officer who has, I don't want to say interest, but is able to communicate with different groups of people so that they don't just say, oh, we'll just talk to this group of people and, well, these other ones will just ignore because we don't understand what they need, what they want, what the issues in their lives are. There's a big issue of mental health in the Black community, and I feel like it's not addressed, and and I know that we don't have a lot of resources, but we need a police chief who would be willing to address these issues and put more emphasis on that. Because right now it's just, oh, well, just take them to jail or shoot them, and that's not the way everyone's treated. There are just certain groups of people in this community who are treated like that. And I think that the police chief needs to be a kind of person who is open to some other ideas. I'm also think, he should be a person who's interested in restorative justice, which is the idea that when people do something, that what they've done, it actually makes the community better. Because just to lock somebody up, and maybe what would really make the person who was wrong feel better might be something different other than, well, we'll put them in jail for 25 years, and 25 years they'll get out and do the same thing. I think that the police chief needs to be a person who is fair. There's certain people who have been in this community for so long that everybody says, oh, well, that's just the way they are. And I think that's wrong. It's unfair to say, oh, well, this person, they've been here this long, and they've always done it like that, and so we can't change, and it's got to stay like that. I would like to see someone who is intelligent enough to put some real ideas on the table to make our communities better, and not just somebody who, well, because they're well-liked among the city bosses, that's all that matters. And I would like to think that the person would be well-educated, but also I think they need to address the issues in the city, because there are issues. We have issues with gangs, and people get killed, and people get caught in crossfires. People get, run over by drunk drivers, and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm not saying those issues don't need to be addressed. I think they need to be addressed, but we need to have someone who's looking at a wider picture.
Rena, thank you. Appreciate that. By the way, Fresno Pacific University has the #1 restorative justice program in the nation. We have it right here in town. So, Fresno Pacific University, yeah. So, fantastic. Anybody else? Number 3, question number 3. Thank you for your comments. This is good to get an opportunity to share, what your desires are. And this will all be put together so that we can make the kinds of choices that the community really wants. Okay, anything else? Yeah, come on back up. We can move it back up, Brandy.
I can just go like this.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with so much of what she said. A lot of it overlaps the things I was thinking in my mind, and I appreciate that greatly. So I wanted, wholeheartedly, yes. And I agree. I feel like the quality I think would be extremely important is that that the chief would have experience and knowledge, but also a willingness to learn about specific issues that would be important to be able to interact with all people. But not only that, but to be very assertive about making sure that all officers are trained and are proficient and are following models that are sensitive to different issues. People working with people who have had PTSD or some, a trauma-informed approach, considering that a lot of the people in our community have experienced trauma, and that affects how they interact with law enforcement, and it affects how, what they're doing, and having that, having that background, understanding the particular ways that is fleshed out when you're dealing with domestic violence, when you're dealing with foster youth, when you're dealing with different issues, all these different issues, and recognizing that, it's not a cookie cutter thing, but actually being willing to listen and continue to have a force that is proficient in understanding and being sensitive to issues, especially to those that are more easily vilified and more easily marginalized, with a huge emphasis on piggyback with that, a huge emphasis, a huge value, experience, and a priority of training and cultivating and better developing a workforce that focuses on de-escalation and other practices that help, that fit in with restorative justice, that fit in with coming up with, dealing with these in the most effective manner, and dealing with different groups, like these different things. And also, along with that, I think another quality would be having a record of exemplary, excellent conduct, but also a value for being very strong as far as making sure that the people that he's leading have a good have excellent conduct and being willing to do what is needed whenever that does not happen, whenever there is claims of things that are not, there is poor conduct, being willing to investigate, being willing to discipline the people under his command appropriately so that we can have, so that everyone in the force is held accountable and is seeking to have excellent conduct and excellent interaction and care for the community that they're serving.
Thank you, Brandy. Yes. And by the way, trauma-informed instruction is now being pushed into the schools, which is really good. And we're starting to see some positive effects from that, which means that the police chief's job will be easier when kids learn that and the adults who work with them do that. So it's a good combination. Thank you for sharing. Number 3, anything else? Yeah, come on up.
I wasn't here in the beginning. I just showed up. So I don't know if we're announcing our names, but
Yes,
my name is
please.
Nia Parks. My area code is 93726. And I just showed up right now, so I didn't hear what everyone else was saying, but these are some of the points that I would want and the qualities of a new police chief. I don't know if anyone's heard about some of the things that Jerry's been going through. I call him Jerry, I don't call him Chief Dyer. Has been going through, and a lot of the investigation things that are happening that no one's following up on. But that's my biggest thing. I don't want another corrupt person in power. I don't want another person making rules of putting $40 taxes on people who are getting their cars towed and then towing 3 times as many cars as he was when they first started towing cars when he first came in 2004. I don't want a person who's out there as a predator and I'm considered their prey, and so they want to basically get as much out from me and not give back to me and help me because that's their job. I mean, these are things that I want someone. I want to look at the person and feel that they're doing a justice for me and not not something to me. And that's what I feel like a lot of police officers are. I mean, even right now, I was driving and I shouldn't have fear of the police, but I do. My heart jumps. I race. I get anxiety, and I have no reason to. I have no reason to. But because of what you hear and the things that are going on in your own community, it makes you very uncomfortable to trust somebody when they have such a bad rep. And that's what Jerry has to be, a very bad rep. And so I don't want that next person to have that same influence or that same type of mentality and keeping these same old rules that Jerry has, the taxpayers who are paying their wages and having to feel like I'm a victim. In that sense of a way. So that's one of the qualities I really want in that person. I don't want a person that has that mentality who's following behind Jerry and trying to keep his BS rules. I want someone that's going to be there, that's going to want to put back into our community. There's a lot of things that are happening in our community that I don't even know what happened to this. The police officers get 80% of our money that comes into Fresno, and I'm thinking the rest of it goes to our parks, our schools, our roads, our teachers. I mean, that's ridiculous, and they don't even show 80% of or Fresno's not even showing 80% of a good city to live in. Actually, we're one of the worst cities to live in. So why would we give you 80% of our money and you don't give me 80% of your, 80% back is showing that my city is an 80% good city to live in. And so those are one of the big major things I would like that person to consider also. Maybe changing the rules up a little bit, getting some things moving in that ball, and wanting to make a change in Fresno instead of trying to keep the same old rules and the same old mentality that that Jerry's been doing. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your input. Sure, come on back up and then. Okay.
And that's very important. There needs to be an easier way to complain about the police. My car, I ran over a curb and I broke my rim. the police officers screamed, yelled, hollered at me, to the point that when I tried to call my tow company, the lady called me back and said, "Are you all right? Why is he doing that? Who is that talking to you?" It was a police officer. And, and I have a lot of things that I do. I have 3 kids that I take care of, and I don't have time to be trying to find out in some directory who in the heck is the right person to complain to. It needs to be really easy and really straightforward ways that, because, this person, and I can't blame anybody but myself that I didn't complain, but it needs to be an easy way to do it, so that if something happens to you and it's unacceptable, that there's an easy way to complain about it. Okay. Because when things happen to us, like she was saying, and then how do you complain about it? Who are we complaining to,
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Next.
I want to follow up on the comments that were made earlier about corruption. My name's Jerry Bill, resident of Fresno for 49 years now, watching the police all that time. And unfortunately, I've known for much of that time that the police in Fresno are kind of known as a corrupt force. They have that reputation. And I've seen many instances of it. The Keith Foster incident being a sort of a recent example of that, but this goes back many, many years. So I'm reluctant to say this, but I think it needs to be said, and that is, I think the next police chief is going to have to come from the outside. I think, I'm not saying there are no good officers on the force. There are good officers. I know some of them. But unfortunately, they will have loyalties which create a sort of conflict of interest when it comes to sort of cleaning up the department. And I think only an outsider would be able to do that. So there's a saying, a new broom sweeps clean, but in this case, it has to be a new broom from the outside. There's much evidence for what I'm talking about. I'll make reference to the Josephson Institute study that was done 4 or 5 years ago now. This is a well-respected outside agency that does analyses of police departments, and they found a lot of serious issues within the Fresno PD. This was not an in-house survey done with softball questions. This was a difficult survey, and they found a lot of officers saying things like, for instance, I think it was 34% that said they believe falsification of reports is a serious issue in the Fresno PD. Significant percentages said that there is not leadership at the top to promote ethical behavior, and so on. And this is feedback coming from the officers, sworn officers in the Fresno Police Department, who were very dissatisfied with the way the department was being run. So yes, there are some good officers in the department, but I think we're going to be much better off if we hire from the outside somebody who doesn't have any loyalties to the people that have been involved in sort of misdeeds in the past. So I'm afraid that's where we need to go.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Yes, come on up.
Hi, everybody.
Your name?
My name is Christine.
Thank you.
And yes. So one thing that's bothered me a little bit is about number 2 that goes to number 4. I would like to have a new leader that has good Judeo-Christian values. I think that brings a wholesomeness into our city. And that's not to say that I'm discriminating against other religions. I like the Hmong people, I like other people. It's just that the Western values welcome freedom of choice, and it's very respectful. I was a little bothered when there were some shootings downtown. My husband worked downtown, and 6 people died. And it was that man that said Allah Akbar when he was killing people. He said that in the police car, he said that in the courtroom. But when the police were giving a report on the news about what happened, he said it was a racial motivated crime. When obviously that man was very religious, was why he was doing the killings. So I wanted some more transparency because the public needs to be warned about what some people are doing sometimes. And I would like someone who's got that quality, the honesty, and so that's I would feel safer if because there were 2 boys by Fig Garden that were shot, and then nothing was heard about it, about what happened afterwards. Was it a hate, what it was? So I'd like more honesty and transparency that way to keep us well armed.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Appreciate it. Anything else? Sure, come on up.
Hi, my name is Maria Els, and I would like to see the quality I would like to see in the next police chief is a police chief that's fearless. Not fearless like the Jerry Dyer sense of fearless, like gangster kind of fearless, but more fearless in they'll go in, like that person from the outside coming in, and clean up the department. Like find different ways to teach de-escalation, not go towards this militarization of how they police, and especially how they police certain communities. And a police chief that can understand that poverty should not be a crime, but poverty also breeds, but poverty does breed criminal activity because of some of the means that people take to survive. So them being sensitive to that and not go into the communities to basically oppress and suppress the communities, but actually respond to crime that's in progress. And 50% of the city's budget goes to the police department, and what I've learned is to whom much is given, much is required. If the police don't want to step up and do that 50% of that job, then we also need a police chief that'll say, hey, you know what? We're doing too much of this social service kind of stuff. We need to be responding to crime. So, you know what? We're going to work with the community and release that budget and go for a smaller budget, maybe 30%, 35%, something that's comparable to other parts of the nation. Our police control more of the city's money than most police departments across the United States. So if they can't do the job and they don't want to take on, we don't want to deal with figuring out if this responds to somebody who's mentally ill, then that money needs to be moved. It needs to be moved back into those communities, back into those social services, and then we can reduce crime that way, because it's more than one way to reduce crime. And right now, we punish and we criminalize poverty, and we criminalize those who are disenfranchised. So I want to see a fearless police officer that can be creative and think and get some solutions that can really improve our city. We should be ashamed that we're the 10th most racist city in the nation, and we should definitely be ashamed that we are the second poorest city in the nation. So our city needs to work together, and the police department has a lot of responsibility in that, since they control so much of the city's budget.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate it. Okay. Anybody else on question number 3? Yeah, Sandra, come on back.
So I echo all of the comments that have been made so far. I have started to jot down thoughts. So I agree in the fact that the next police chief needs to be trustworthy, and that again is built through direct partnership with communities that are served. That also includes not making sure that there isn't white lies And what I mean by that, I think somebody mentioned earlier about Measure P opposition, and to me that was really just about asking for half of the resources and not actually thinking about how do we create community safety in a way that actually reflects community policing, which is about investing resources in social services, in parks, and other ways that help prevent crime, in youth programming, in victim services, and all of these things that there's been tons of research over the last 30 years that I think we need to be implementing. I think the next police chief also should be come from a perspective of being a guardian of our community, not an enforcer of the law or a warrior, but really more about protecting the safety of everyone in our community. I elevate again the issue of transparency, right? There is no trust that can be built or maintained if there isn't transparency in how we conduct policing in our community. And that really goes to also holding people accountable. Both the chief itself should hold themselves accountable, and the police officers that they employ. And I think, you know, examples have been brought up around, you know, bad apples within the department. And like, absolutely, our next police chief should know if his best friend is smuggling drugs, and they should know if the vehicle theft unit is running a chop shop, and all of the things that we know have happened in our history. And that there's also a commitment to not just abiding by the legal standard when force is used, but by the moral standard, right? That even though it doesn't arise to the level of being legally using the overuse of force, that there is a moral standard in how we handle other human beings and how we respond to other human beings that are obviously in need or having some type of issue, which is when they come in contact with police. That welcomes robust, and I'm going to say this again, robust community oversight, not a checkmark group of people who just want to be there for the photo op, but that are going to be thoughtful about how are we actually policing in our community, and are we getting to where we want to be. That is representative of the community, and I mean that in both gender, age, race, ethnicity, beliefs, and everything that makes Fresno a really great place to live when we look beyond the surface, and that they take actionable steps to make sure that the department itself reflects the community. That person is innovative and intuitive. Again, if we want to step into 21st century policing, then we need somebody who can think broader than just doing the standard operations. That is also committed to authentic community policing in both philosophy and practice. And I'll share an example of this, is that the resources, the way that they're allocated in our police department, should reflect that, right? So that we shouldn't rely on grants to be able to carry out community policing programs. And that community policing is not just having a barbecue or an event after somebody gets shot in a neighborhood, right? That we're actually responding with trauma-informed services. And that, again, it remains politically neutral. I think that, again, if we're serious about the next chief serving everyone, then politics needs to stay out of that equation.
Thank you, Sandra. Anyone else on number 3? Sure, come on up.
Hello, everybody.
What's your name?
I'm anonymous. Yeah.
Okay.
So a comment was made earlier about religion, and I don't know. I feel like what qualities are most important to look for in the next chief? Well, I think that we should, shouldn't prioritize serving one religion over another, or like the KKK was saying that we're the good Christian nation, and the white Nazis, this is a perfect example of Judeo-Christian, and they were lynching the natives of this land, indigenous people, over 500 years of colonialism, and enslaved people from Africa. They said they were doing it in the name of Christ. So you tell me how that's reflective of Judeo-Christian values. And then also, mental health services, de-escalation tactics was also mentioned. I feel like, that's already been covered. What I wanted to say was the saturation of patrols. Why is it that south of Shaw, there's a high saturation of patrols? The further south you go towards Kings Canyon, you go up towards Herndon, you don't see saturated patrols. So, I mean, it's only natural that certain groups of people like low income or people of color, minority, or working class white folk that live in Kings Canyon around those areas amongst everybody else are gonna feel like they're not treated the same as somebody like a shepherd in Champlain and Perrin or something. So I think there needs to be a equal distribution that, don't blame the people for feeling profiled. And there needs to be an understanding of social justice and more resources towards after-school programs and therapeutic service and parks and so forth.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. Number 3, anybody else? Another comment? Sure.
And enough Islamophobia. I'm tired of it. A lot of people are tired of it. Enough homophobia, xenophobia, anti-immigrant rhetoric. Stop working with ICE.
Okay.
Because the language barriers make people not want to trust enforcement. That creates problems when trying to solve a crime.
Okay. Anybody else on number 3? Sure, come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Efraim Boteo, 93702. I think just going back to the community policing, I think I would want to see a new chief of police that rethinks what community policing is. From my own experience, starting off like as 16, 17-year-olds, with the help of organizations like Barrios Unidos and Boys and Men of Color and building healthy communities, I started advocating for better parks because I seen it as a way of public safety, a new way of thinking of public safety. And it was really discouraging last year when I saw the chief of police going against this new idea of what community policing and what public safety looks like. So definitely someone that has new ideas other than just like we're talking about earlier, saturation of policing. I'm born and raised in Southeast Fresno, and I've seen the saturation of policing there. And I see it in Southwest Fresno as well, and it hasn't really helped at all. I feel it's funny because I have a friend who travels up and down California who stopped by Fresno about 3 weeks ago, and the first thing he noticed is how much police officers were in my neighborhood. And he's like, damn, this is like the most police officers I've seen in any other city in California. So to me, that was really crazy, and I think like that shouldn't be happening. We're just criminalizing poverty, and that's definitely an issue. And also, I wanted to touch on the question 4, which was the suggestions to the city manager and the mayor. I think that's something that has been missing in these conversations is the voices of young people, specifically if you look at the population that is most affected by some of these policies that the chief of police makes. It's let's be explicit, it's young men of color who are being affected by mass incarceration and all these issues. So I think we need to start looking into bringing in more young men of color. I've heard that there's going to be a panel or some type of group that's going to be selected by the city manager or some city officials. And I think it's really necessary that you make sure that there's young men of color on that table, because like I said, these are the people who are directly being impacted by these policies. And we can't just speak for the people who are being most effective. They got to be at the table themselves, telling them about their own experiences, because I think that's something that's been missing along the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else on number 3? Are we good? Sure.
My name is Josefa Vega. I'm from also 93702, City Council District 7, Esparsas District. I wanted to note that in seeking the next police chief, I would want someone who doesn't harbor anti-immigrant sentiment, who doesn't actively racially profile people, who doesn't actively criminalize the mentally ill or the homeless. And like many have mentioned before, the criminalization of poverty, the marginalization of people of color, the marginalization of folks south of Shaw. I want that to be addressed. And in reference to the loyalists, I do see certain aspects of benefit in having someone from the outside come in, but it's also, it depends on where they're coming from. one. Two, they need to be briefed on the issues that we're facing daily here, especially like many have mentioned the division in the tale of two cities that people refer to. That's really divisive, and also just the general consideration of racial and ethnic kind of interactions here, and being aware of our diversity here, and also to address the Judeo-Christian argument as well. I feel like that's really oppressive. Like someone mentioned before, like Judeo-Christian values are slavery, they're war. They're not what you're stating as like being so wholesome. That's human decency, and that's something that our current chief lacks. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Number 3. All right, let's go to number 4. Anything you'd like the city manager? Dorothy, come on up. Yeah, number 4.
Dottie Smith again. When I was up here before, I said that I'm a retired educator. And I did not say this, though. I grew up in Southwest Fresno, and I've heard a lot of people talking about poverty, criminalizing poverty. Well, I know what poverty is. I didn't have running water or bathroom in my house until I was in 11th grade at Washington High School. I know what it is to work in the fields. I know what it is to be a person of color. But I don't understand why, when you talk about some of the things that cause people to do wrong, has to do with poverty. And when I say I know what it was to be poor, and I did not know how poor I was until I enrolled at Fresno State and realized my family was below the poverty level. So I don't want us to keep saying that poverty causes people to do wrong, because it doesn't. And another thing that I need us to understand is that having been a little poor black girl growing up in Southwest Fresno, is that I realize there's always somebody who will help you if you seek the help and if you understand. That's where the schools come in. But I haven't heard anybody say anything about parents and their responsibility. I think when we choose this new police chief, we need to think about being partners, not just what the chief is supposed to do. And having been as a retired educator, I am also fed up with the fact that you send everything to the schools. It's a community conjoint thing when we talk about making our community safer. So what do we do when we talk about the city manager, et cetera, et cetera? All of these people should be responsible to us, the taxpayers, we the people. And I please, I mean, some of you may get upset with me when I say that poverty does not make you a criminal. You make choices. And parents, community, we need to have the resources, though, to make sure that there are things available for young people. We need to make sure that there's help in our schools. But we cannot, when we talk about criminalization, we talk about young boys and girls of color, because this happens too, are being picked on. We need to also talk about parents. Kids may not do what you say, but they'll do what you do. We need to be a community doing what we need to do to make sure when we do elect this police chief, that he or she understands it is a community effort and we are partners. And I don't think that blame should go to anyone. We need to all come to the table. And as Shirley Chisholm said, when we talk about the table, I heard a young man say about the table, if they don't invite you to the table, she always said, bring your folding chair and you sit at the table so that you will be able to have a voice. It's not about something that's going to affect your life, that you have to wait for somebody to call you. And we need to know about meetings. When you talked about transparency, we need to know about these things. And they don't have to invite you. The mayor does not have to invite you. The city manager, this is our city. You pay taxes. You can invite yourself. You may be an unwelcome visitors, but you need to understand that when election times come, these people who don't want to listen to you, you make sure that you're registered to vote and that you vote.
Thank you, Dottie. I might mention Dottie's a great role model. Growing up as she did, became an administrator in Fresno Unified, became a board member, State Center Community College. So wonderful, wonderful example. Thank you, Dottie. Appreciate that. Okay. Anybody else that you'd like the city manager to know? Sure, come on up.
Hey, good evening. My name's Art Flores, District 1. So I kind of rolled all my thoughts into one. I kind of waited. I've been observing. So the first thing that I would say, our next police chief needs to be support the community. I think everybody's in agreement that community policing is extremely important with our next police chief. Somebody that's going to be involved, support the youth programs, somebody that has a good track record with doing so. The next point is somebody, I know somebody mentioned that it needs to be somebody from the outside. I think Fresno's a very complex city, one of the most complex cities here in California. Somebody new, if it would be somebody new, I would expect them to when they take position, not have a learning curve or not take a cooling period of learning the city. I would like to see somebody that knows the city, has worked in the city, and has a proven record in the city of Fresno or in the near area that knows the area. Homelessness obviously is something that's a big, has been talked about several times. I've been watching the other community meetings. That's something that I think, though it doesn't fall on the police chief's shoulders, is something that the police chief needs to be involved in, needs to be involved in the decisions that are made with homelessness, with the organizations that are leading the city in trying to fight this issue that we have, that not just Fresno's facing, but as a state, California, us being one of the biggest cities in California, the chief would need to be involved in that essence. Fourth point is I think the chief needs to represent our demographics. The demographics of Fresno, obviously we're a very complex city, but African American, Hispanic, Hmong, I think the chief needs to represent what the city is in order to be able to understand and to relate. I'm not saying that somebody that doesn't, maybe a white person can't relate, but I think that for the residents of Fresno, the majority of residents of Fresno to relate to the chief, I think that would be something that would be important in making the decision. The last one is I do think that we have people here in Fresno that would fit that bill, that have a proven track record, that are respected in the community, that are respected by our youth, and I think that's something that needs to be considered as well.
Thank you very much for your input. Appreciate it. Anybody else on number 4? Welcome.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Nadia. What I would like to see in the next police chief is someone who maybe make work programs for foster kids, because I mean, I'm a foster kid and I've been in foster care for about 2 or 3 years, and I've seen a lot of things for like homeless youth. Not saying that's wrong or anything, but I don't really see a lot of things for like foster youth or anything, because I was in a different home and it wasn't a very good situation, and I didn't really have like a safe place where I could just go and not be nervous. So I would like to see a safe place for foster kids.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Anyone else? Sure, come on back. It's okay, Brandy, you can be up here 20 times.
Well, they're different,
yes,
different
absolutely,
points.
no problem.
And I actually just thought about this, so I did the online survey, but just considered listening to these things. By the way, I'm District 7, since I didn't mention that the first time. As far as something that doesn't fit into these 3 that I think the city manager should consider is, we've voiced a lot of different things that we want the police chief to be sensitive to and be knowledgeable and direct his force in. I would like to see in the process of looking for a chief, the chief is being able to verify through communicating with the people in their community, verify in different ways that they actually have had experience and reflect these things outside of their application, outside interviews, outside of the police department. I know that this person might have been a chief, might have been it might be a police officer, but in some way, their experience with, if they're a chief or if they had any sort of leadership, how their relationship has been with oversight committees, how experience with, showing leadership towards the city themselves and speaking up for their community, their relationship with different marginalized groups, with different demographics. And I'm trying to think of how the best way to do that would be, but as far as being able to reach out to the community that they are a part of, researching, looking at different things to be able to verify what their experience has actually been with addressing these issues that we've brought up, so we can have, so we have information backing, whatever it is that they're saying their values and their experience has been.
Thank you very much. Hey, anybody else with any comments? Sure, come on up. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Natalie Barajas, and I'm a student at Fresno City College. And I've been to some of the past community hearings, and something that I noticed was that at all these community hearings, they've been held at schools, yet there hasn't been a whole lot of youth from these schools attending these meetings. So there needs to be more intention when outreaching to these populations. So for example, how many students here actually go to Hoover? Already right there, it's extremely concerning, especially when there's about more than 1,000 students that go to Hoover?
About 2,200.
2,200. So this is something concerning, especially since youth are dealing with SROs every day, or school resource officers, and like what Gabriel mentioned earlier, that he wasn't feeling safe at school. And he's not the only one feeling this way towards SROs or police officers in general. Like at the time when I went to high school, some of the teachers had been using the SROs as a form of power and as a way to threaten the students just for being on their phone. So more student input definitely needs to be considered when selecting the next police chief, whether it is making the community hearings more intentional towards youth, or going to these schools and giving out surveys, or another way for youth to be more active in all of these. Not just only during the search for the police chief, but also afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. Hey, sure, come on back up.
So I just wanted to make a note. When we talk about social justice, some people stereotype that as, oh, you're being soft on crime. No, not really, because one of my things here is we need to prioritize the apprehending pedophiles and serial rapists, especially those who are already on the Megan's list, Megan's Law. I feel like a lot of them run rampant, and that's like the lowest priority for our law enforcement. Instead, they're out here messing with the homeless. With that being said, the jails are already packed. We need to focus on treatment and rehabilitation rather than incarceration for victims of addiction and their families. With that being said, we see a lot of families broken up by drugs, generations and generations. So sometimes there's custody disputes, 50-50, or, my weekend, their weekend, different parents. So maybe establish a separate division specializing in family law disputes. I've seen it firsthand, personal experience, response time being very horrible when it comes to, they're withholding the child, or, there's, what do you call a safety check in terms of, the well-being of the child with, the other parent. And legalizing a safe homeless campground. I'll use Modesto, California, for example. Recently they set up tents and portable bathrooms. So we need to stop allowing the corruption of the nonprofit industrial complex to run rampant. We see that all the time. Where's the Poverello and the Mission going? It's the same cycle. No more criminalizing the homeless. It just continues the revolving door, in and out of jail, in and out of prison. Those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, Sandra, come on. Okay. Little balance.
So I just wanted to echo all of the young people's comments because it reminded me of the fact that Fresno is a fairly young city. The average Fresnan is about 30 years old, most likely Latina, most likely single. And we have a huge population of young people under 18 years of age for a city of our size, which ranges between 35 to 42%, depending on which data set you're looking at. So I think that I would just highlight this as a fact that if we're thinking about our next police chief, it really does need to be someone who can police into the future, right? Who's going to be able to relate to the young people in the room today and the young people in our community and police in different ways that we haven't seen before. So I really want to just highlight and echo that and support the young people that came up here. The other thing that I would say to the city manager is that, you know, if we're talking about community engagement is not just presenting the finalists to the community so they can meet them and give their final approval, but it is about establishing a committee that includes both people from the department, people from the city, and community members who can not only help draft the job description and draft the interview questions and interview folks, but also help with the recruitment process. And there's tons of really good examples across the country where this process has been done. So I'd really encourage for folks to look into that. And then finally, I just want to echo what others have said in that I personally do not believe that the next police chief should come from the department, that there is already a lot of distrust within the department, that if we're serious about doing something different and bold and responsive, it needs to be someone from outside of the department, and that we can find that person through this robust national search where they can have the experience and all of the things that folks have been echoing, and that we have to stop believing this lie that we tell ourselves that somehow Fresno's different. When you actually compare us with cities across the state and across the country, our problems are pretty similar, our demographics are pretty similar, so I think that we can definitely look at best practices from other places and apply them here locally.
Thank you, Sandra. Anything else someone would like to contribute? If not, I want to thank you very much for your participation. I also want to encourage you, if something pops up that you want to make sure gets known to the city, go to the website, fresno.gov, and fill out the survey. You can still do that even though you participate in this particular meeting. Fill it out. They'll take all of the input, put it together. Thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate the comments, and have a safe drive home, and have a good evening. Thank you very much.